open the pod bay doors, please, Hal?
The pod bay doors are open. Thank you very much for joining us once again. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here, as always, my intrepid co-host, who, has slowly been gaining a reputation. Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com. What's going on, Jer?
Doug, how much money do we have left?
We just have 300.
We must turn this podcast
for the
back to its former glory.
Today, we are celebrating the 100th birthday year of master director Satyjit Ray. As far as I know, it's Ray, but...
Is it Ray or Rye?
That's probably an Englishification of it.
Both ways. It's kind of...
Right.
Americanization
I've heard Satyjit.
Probably pronouncing Satyjit wrong.
I'm not 100% sure.
I have to go with the first time I ever heard it, and that was from Audrey Hepburn. She called him Satyjit
introduction
Ray.
Of
now that could be wrong. I don't know.
What's her name? Idina Menzel. Hamid Dazim.
Idina Menzel.
What did you just say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who?
So. And we're doing The Music Room, which was Ray's fourth feature.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
Jalzigar? Jalzigar,
yeah.
I think is the name. Is how you pronounce it. Jalzigar.
It was his fourth film.
Yeah, means the music.
He did the first two in the Apu trilogy. Then he did, The Philosopher's Stone, which I guess is a comedy. I haven't seen that one. And then he did this, and then he did Upper Censor.
Mm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, his last film was in 1991, and his last day was
until
April
he got
23rd, 1992. So,
which was a couple of
Well, about
days
almost a month.
after he had been given the Oscar.
April 23rd.
Um, was it a month? Well,
Yeah.
if it's April 3rd
Yep.
and the Oscars are on 23rd, okay, and the Oscars are on March 30th, that's 3 weeks. They gave him the Lifetime Achievement Award.
And back when they only
Back
gave
at the
one at a
time when the
time,
Oscars actually gave the
I
Lifetime
kind of
Achievement
like the
Award
fact
on the
that they're
show.
getting more people their due, because there are more
Yeah.
people that deserve it than could have possibly been awarded the standard way. Mm-hmm.
But during that time, I got interested because I'd never heard of, because before that I'd never heard of Satyjit Ray, and uh, he was given the Lifetime Achievement Award. They recorded some comments because he was on his basically on his deathbed in Calcutta, and he gave a videotaped acceptance speech, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of him. And they did this montage package,
Yeah,
of his work, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. They did the same thing with Fellini. He got to be there. Fellini got to be there. And again,
yeah.
a year before he died.
And
You know,
Robert Altman
and they did the same thing with Hal
died a
Roach.
few months
Hal
after
Roach
he
was
got
100
his
years
honorary
old,
too.
and yeah,
Right before.
So see, sometimes they catch these people before, just before
So,
they.
this was your first
Yeah, which were a few
experience
years
with this
earlier,
picture,
but
wasn't it?
know.
How? What do you? Where do you fall on this one? This is an odd movie.
It was, and I've seen it twice. Well, I was ready for
It is.
I was ready for Apu, the kind of thing. But it's the flip side. Apu is about people born dirt poor,
Right,
or
and
down to
the
nothing.
the crumbling aristocracy.
This is about the aristocracy. This is about
Yeah.
crumbling aristocracy. And basically, what both have to say
Right,
is things are tough all over.
This
It doesn't really
particular
matter if you have money, because life sucks.
rich landowner, yeah, is not particularly frugal or good
Boy.
with money. So whatever riches he had inherited, most likely, he just spent it all away. Yeah. He's
lazy.
Yeah, yeah.
He just kind of lays around his palace, and in some cases, just literally
he's trying
lays
to
around.
hold on to a time where just because you were known and rich meant you didn't need any more money. You could just spend and you could get credit, and it didn't matter.
Right.
Because first of all, he had lands that he was collecting rent on, and farming, and all of that, and then a big flood came and basically wiped him out, and he refused to change or see it. So that brought about his financial ruin. Right, right. He's rearranging the deck chairs,
and he's still going about the lifestyle that he had while the ship is sinking.
He is very concerned about his image, which is ironic. Right, it was a pride and joy.
And in particular, this music room, because and it's a temple of his of the glory of what this palace was, of what
Where he just
He's got pictures of his
what about that
ancestors on the
one part where
walls,
he goes into the music
a
room and he has a
mirror on
chair in
a
front of
huge
the mirror
mirror
and
on
he
the
just
wall, and
sits
it's
there and
just like,
drinks his sherbet? Like, that is narcissism to like the nth degree. That's
mm, yeah. He's hard to get close to.
with him just
The
sitting there.
very
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, the most striking image in the film is the very first one. He's just sitting on the roof of his palace in this chair that his little servant has brought up to him.
Yeah.
Um,
Listen, I
and by the
love
way,
it
the
the
actor
way
who
that
plays his
when
servant, that is
he's
the most
gonna reopen the
expressive
music
actor
room,
I've ever seen.
the joy on
He's
this
just,
guy's face, not because this is
mm,
ultimately going to ruin him, but because this is a spark of the former master. Now, he has been in a. I'll give him a break for the 4 years after his wife and kid died, like where we find him, because yeah, um,
yeah,
when we flash back to that,
that I didn't
uh,
expect.
that's just devastating. And the man was already in a malaise, um, but he was riding on
Yeah,
status and reputation. Um, and then, due to his egotism, his wife and child
mm,
die. And he closes up the music room. He's in a deep depression.
right.
He refuses to see the trouble that he is in uh, financially. So concerned with how he looked
Mm-hmm.
socially that he let everything that would announce his position fall apart. The palace starts to crumble. They have to sell the furniture downstairs. They have to get rid of most
Yeah,
of the servants. Yeah, he hasn't been downstairs in 4 years. Yeah.
and he doesn't go downstairs for ages. Yeah. Um, you know what he reminded me of, and you'll forgive me for Americanizing this, but he reminded me a little bit of an old quarterback. He has his trophy room. He has his room where his
Mm-hmm.
jerseys hung up and all of his all of his. He used to be in the spotlight, and this this
This
this
room
room
is like
is
Rocky's
all of the
diner,
things that
Rocky's
were
restaurant.
special about him, and right, right,
Mm-hmm.
right, right. And everybody comes in and they're just all they want to hear. All they want is some stories. Tell them some stories of the past glory, the time that's gone,
Mm-hmm.
and it is that flittering, of what made him special. But he's too lazy and too short-sighted to realize that if he would get off of his butt and actually
Mm-hmm.
do something, you know, he's just letting it just crumble to dust.
Yeah, we've got
How
like
much money do we
300
have? It's like I
consecrated to
said
the
at the beginning. How
deity, and
much money
that's
do we
all
have?
we've got.
Like, nothing,
How
master.
much is this dancer?
You know,
200. All right, well, let's put on a concert and don't be stingy. It's like,
yeah.
stingy with what? You've got like 100,
Mm.
whatever the currency there is at the time, I guess rupees, but probably more than that. Um, you've got these gold coins. Right, right. And then the worst part, at the end of all
What am I
that,
going to pay
to
him with?
make a big
Sand? It's
show,
like,
he gives the dancer all the rest of his money. Like, I mean, it winds up being okay because the next day he rides off on a horse and it bucks and he dies, but still, it's very short-sighted. Um, yeah, and
still.
this rivalry that he's created in his mind with this moneylender's son who's doing really well for himself, but he's crass new money.
Hmm. He's crass new money. He has no appreciation for letters and arts. He goes to the music room. We see a flashback where he's in the music room and he's sitting there. He's kind of
Right.
he's not really
Despite the
enjoying
fact that
this at
he makes
all,
his
and
own
it's not
music room
it's not catching him at all.
simply
He's not a
to
man who
emulate
understands
Roy.
any of that.
He is trying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's
All that stuff, and
it's,
it's
it's
just
popular music.
it sounds beautiful,
It's
but
and
yeah.
you know, unlike East Asia.
To that musical number.
Hmm.
Because he starts singing the medley, he starts singing the opening part, and then the real music cuts in, and it's like he's getting down. I mean,
Hmm.
it's really
Yeah, he's like vocalizing for like a long time, and then he starts the
Mhm.
words. Um, and with that beard, and every now and again you see that just the flash of his lower
Mhm.
lip. He looked like a
Mhm.
Muppet.
I kept thinking, how much wax is in that beard? You know, um, it's very unusual. Uh,
Hmm.
I was surprised because I'm used to American films where you'll have a musical number that goes on for 3 minutes, two
Hmm.
minutes, and they won't play the whole song.
Or you have this great big concert that they're supposed to be giving. They go out, they play one song, and they say goodnight, and everybody's satisfied
Yeah,
with it.
yeah.
Like, wait a minute, no,
Or
no.
what they used to do, I think they did this mostly in the 80s, where they would start a scene where they would show you the band that's playing, and you
Hmm.
would hear the opening of the song, and then it would go to the scene, and it's like the band, who cares about that?
Right,
It's
right.
it's like no respect for the musician at all.
Or they'll you'll see the band starting to play it, and then it cuts away to something else with them playing over top of
Right,
it. It's like
right. And you can just
you've
barely
just
hear it
been
in the background.
downgraded. Right. Or it becomes the album
Yeah.
version, and it carries on in a scene outside of wherever they were. It's like,
Extremely
well, that's
edited.
not fair.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. This is
They
not.
respect the Ray respects these actors, these performers. The dancer at the end, her performance goes from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that's singing, beginning to end, he's singing the whole song.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, this could be a movie just about this music room.
Mm-hmm.
The story, it's a good story. It's a very good story.
It's a
It's
wonderful
very
story, yeah.
universal.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, I really did not connect with him until very late in the film.
Mm-hmm.
He has a scene where he goes back to the music room and he opens it up for the first time in 4 years. And there's dust and there's cobwebs all over the place, and it's the athlete reopening the trophy room, reliving the
Mm-hmm.
former glory. And he stands there and he looks at this chandelier. And the chandelier is really the central image of this film.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts having a memory. And I connected with that because I've done that. You see something from your past and it
Mm-hmm.
triggers a memory and
Mm-hmm.
you start going back. Um, that's a very universal theme.
Right.
And I thought, okay, I can't connect with how he is taking care of himself and his palace,
Right.
but I understand his passion.
You can connect with him as a person, just not as a just as a human.
Yeah.
Moreover than his
Mm.
life. You can't really connect with his life. I can see that. He's not a sympathetic
No.
character. despite all of the terrible things that happened to
I
him.
mean, he lost his family.
Um,
I mean,
yeah, but uh, to be fair, if he hadn't forced them to come back, they would still be
right.
alive. So all those times where you see people going, "It's my fault they died," and people are like, "No, it's not your fault." No, that cannot be said here.
Mm-hmm.
This was his
This
fault.
was him.
Um, and in the he's bankrupting himself,
Mm-hmm.
and then his family got caught in a cyclone coming
Mm-hmm.
back from. She was taking care of her dying father.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how would that feel?
Yeah.
You're a dying person, and then you find out that your child died just before you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah.
like of unnatural causes. Like it's that's got to be tough on them. But he he's a man who does not learn his
No, he does
lessons.
not.
He
Until it's way too late.
right, right, and then when he sees in the morning after his revival
Mm-hmm.
of the music room, he's in there, he's drunk, and it's getting to be daylight, and the lamps are going out.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, that's that's him extinguishing.
Mm-hmm.
As those candles taper down, this was literally the last hurrah for him,
Well,
whether he knew it or not.
and also again trying to find the former glory when he pulls that chair up to the uh, when he pulls that chair up to the mirror. There's a painting of him on the wall,
Hmm.
painted at his peak,
Hmm.
and he pulls the chair up, and he's trying to replicate what that was,
Hmm.
um, and that moment, and trying to see himself now as he was then, but also
He,
realizing that's a futile exercise because he's let it all crumble to dust.
he's a shell of who he
Yeah,
was, and he wasn't really all that filled in the first
right,
place.
right.
Um, Grief destroyed whatever he had left in
Mhm.
him. Um, and he just let depression swallow him whole.
Yeah.
And his servant looks at this as a, oh, he's become going back to himself now. This is good
Mm.
because he's getting his life
Yeah.
back. He's ready to move on. Um, but there's no thought for the next
Mhm.
day.
No.
He never thinks, how much money do I have? How much will I need to eat and pay bills? It's just, I have this money. This person charges this much. Let's get them
How
here.
is he affording a servant and a hookah and the opium and
And the two magnificent
Ye-
horses and
yeah, how is he
the
affording all this?
I think he still has some kind of an
Yeah,
income coming in. He just doesn't have anything liquid.
yeah,
So he doesn't have he's cash poor,
but he
but
has something.
he has something. He has enough.
Mm.
Uh, or he's been getting by on credit all these years, and now that that's not going to happen because the banks denied him any more credit, another loan. Um, that's going to start falling apart very quickly.
Yeah,
Um, because I think he's still got his steward and his whatever, valet or whatever he is.
He's a manservant.
Yeah. Uh, and that's it. It's those two plus him
Mm.
in that house.
Kind of reminds me, and I was doing kind of some half-ass internet research. Someone had mentioned very lightly about could this have been Ray's commentary on the film industry? And I thought, um, I kind of started to expand on that, thinking, okay, here's the film industry. Um, there are a lot of things that film needs to address, a lot of problems, a lot of issues in the world that um, that the the film industry could be doing great things,
Hmm.
but they're always, well, how about a nice musical? And that's kind of the texture of this film. There are things you need
Right.
to address. There are things you need
Right.
to take care of. There are things you need to work on. But how about a nice musical?
Hmm.
How about we open up the music room and have a concert?
Right. Or
I know
um,
that's a weird juxtaposition,
well,
but
and there's also to be said that the state of Indian Bengali
yeah,
uh, cinema, um, I think, had taken to larger budgets without a lot of
hmm,
recouping. So
wasting money.
they were right. They were spending money they didn't have on things that people didn't really want,
Right,
which is exactly what this guy
right,
does. People show up because they have to.
yeah.
Some of them genuinely enjoy it, but
The neighbor doesn't.
no.
He's all
And
but
I'll
pinching his nose because he does not like. He's not a music guy.
you're right. So, and they're only there because of who he
Right.
is. So, yeah, he's gotten by on title
Hmm.
like his whole life, and now that's not. Um, it's not
No.
possible. Like that's not enough anymore, and he sees that all too late, and uh, doesn't reckon with it. He literally tries to ride away,
Right.
and he stumbles upon the boats that his family died
Hmm.
in, and the horse rears, and he dies in basically the same spot.
Yeah. But what else did he have to live for? I mean, he really.
He lost what he had to live for 4 years
Yeah.
previous. He was alive. He wasn't living,
Yeah.
and he it's it could be an allegory for the Indian film industry. It could
Or the American film industry.
the American film industry.
How about a nice
Um,
musical?
yeah, um, but it also um, it also depicts the change in society
Hmm.
that was happening.
Yeah.
Um, because if this is set in 1958,
No, it's set in the
um,
20s.
it's set in the
Hmm.
20s, then they're still under English rule, you know, but things are falling apart. In only 24 years, they'd become an independent nation.
Right. This is
And,
before Gandhi.
right. So, the the life that he's trying to hold on to is gone.
Yeah.
Has slipped away.
It's very Shakespearean, very a lot of King Lear in this. When
Hmm.
he's sitting
There's a bit of Kane in here
when
too.
he's sitting at the on that rooftop at the beginning,
Mhm.
and he's just kind of he's a loafer, and he's just kind of
Mhm.
loafing in that chair, and the manservant comes up and he brings him his hookah, and the man is really this Roy is so out of touch with everything.
Yeah.
Shakespeare could have written that opening scene
Yeah.
when he's standing on the rooftop. He's talking down
Mhm.
to his manservant. His manservant is on the ground and he's talking to him. And it's like, where are we? You know,
Right.
what do we have? He's so out of touch. And
Right. And there's a question of whether he ever actually was in touch.
yeah,
Um, he goes about like he's never had to do
you know,
anything.
I was thinking that it's like I have a feeling his old man probably took care of everything,
Right.
and then his old man died,
And
and he just kept spending and spending and spending on this music room.
right, because as far as he'd ever known, the money was just there.
Yeah,
And for a long time, it
mm,
was. Um, until it wasn't.
right.
And, you know, he he just doesn't
Mm.
change. He doesn't say, "Well, I have less money, let's do less stuff." It's, "Well, I have less money. How much can I throw at it to make it look like I still have a lot of
I want to
money?"
sit in a chair and listen to music and suck on this hookah and do nothing. And you know,
Hey, me too, but
how
I
how can I do
mean,
so much with as little effort as I possibly can? Boy, that sounds
mhm.
like an American aesthetic.
Yeah, right?
But he's not hateful. He's not an awful, terrible person. He's just
No,
lazy.
he doesn't do anything bad or corrupt or
Doesn't really
criminal
associate with
or anything.
anybody.
Yeah, he's just alone,
Mm,
and
naturally.
yeah, and he doesn't do anything bad. He doesn't do anything.
Mm,
Um, his actions are just incredibly
mm,
self-destructive, and uh, because of his position and power, um, his self-destruction is the self-destruction of a lot of other people,
yeah.
or is the destruction of a lot of other people.
See,
And
now it's making me want to see that Philosopher's Stone because I want to see. Because honestly, you've got the bottom of the social, which is the dirt
mhm,
poor in the Apu trilogy. You got the aristocracy. You know, things are tough all over because you got the aristocracy who's letting this his whole kingdom just go to pot.
mhm.
And I'm wondering, it'd be interesting to find out what's in the Philosopher's Stone. What is that movie about? You know, what angle does that bring to the conversation? Because these are the films Ray made in the 1950s.
Well, if I had to guess, I'd say if it's a comedy, it's a humanist comedy.
Yeah,
It just shot in the dark because the man was very sympathetic to people.
and I haven't seen it. I know nothing about it,
I haven't either. Um,
but
I've only seen a handful of his movie. I haven't seen nearly as many as I feel like I should. But
I'm gonna say I'm not a connoisseur of Indian cinema. I should be, but I'm not. I'm more of a connoisseur of Asian cinema. I'm not. I haven't seen too much outside of probably Satyjit Ray's the four films that we've talked about.
hmm yeah, I'm not as well versed in that area of the
Mhm.
world in general in the cinema of India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran,
Well, the thing that
all
I'm
of
the
those
thing that I've
places.
been surrounding myself with lately as I've been going back through, and you'll please forgive me for this transition, but the as of late, when we're trying to be more respectful to other cultures, in our depiction of other cultures. The idea of having Asian characters played by Asian actors,
Mm-hmm.
Indian actors playing Indian characters, and allowing them to tell their own story. I think Shang-Chi comes out this weekend. Largely a Chinese cast or an Asian cast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the one thing that I've been surrounding myself with lately is Hank Azaria, who has given up the role of Apu on The Simpsons because he didn't want to be disrespectful.
Yeah, here's the thing. And what's his name? Mike whatever gave up being Cleveland to
Yeah,
not be
yeah.
disrespectful
Mm.
because he was a white guy. My question is, how did you not realize that
At
this
the
was
beginning.
disrespectful when you started?
Hmm.
Why? And it's only now, for decades, people have been yelling about Hank Azaria being Apu, and it was only after uh, George Floyd's death that he was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be this Indian
I can
character
answer
anymore."
this. I can answer this because, in a very fumbling, well meaning way, the writers of The Simpsons have tried their best to build a character and not a stereotype. They've
Mm-hmm.
tried. Um, their efforts have been one step forward, two steps back.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ever listen to, and I have listened to an interview with, and actually a person from India, a critic from India, who actually was talking about this character and said it is literally one step forward, two steps back because
Mm-hmm.
it's very Americanized. The
Yes.
accent is extremely Americanized.
Oh yeah.
It's like I appreciate the effort to make him into a human being and not just a stereotype, but you still got a long way to go.
Right. And yeah, with him and Mike Henry, it's like you should have known that this was inappropriate from the start.
Right.
Um, how you didn't or why you didn't care is actually the question that should be asked, not uh, are you going to continue? It's why did you start?
I give them credit for their efforts to make it into more than a stereotype, but again, it's very very difficult to do that.
Right, and Mike Henry's Cleveland is not a stereotype
No,
in most ways.
neither is
So
Apu.
the only no, but it's when Cleveland had his own show, I was like, oh, hey, this is great. It's an all black cast. And then I found out who played Cleveland, and I'm like, oh, it's an all black cast except the star.
That show was an amalgamation of all of the black sitcoms, excuse the term, black centric sitcoms from the 70s. From, What's
You know what?
Happening,
I
and
I liked the Cleveland show.
it was all right.
Um,
It was the wobbly third leg of
it
McFarlane's.
it could have been much better
Mhm.
if it wasn't trying to be Family Guy light.
Yeah.
Um, I think it found its stride right before they got rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In the last part, in like seasons 3 and 4, they were starting to build their own actual real show. They were getting away from the weirdness
Mm.
that had set it up in the first two, um, and then they were just canceled. And I love the one that there was a Family Guy. Peter did something, and he ends up being hailed as a race hero.
Mm.
and he was invited to Black Quahog, which was underground, and it was basically Wakanda. And Peter goes, "Well, why didn't you ever have this on your show?" And Cleveland said, "This was going to be the season 5 opener."
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because you wonder, when you address problems, when you address issues, and then people start to ask, why, did you do it? Let me give you an example. There's an episode of The Simpsons where they have a comedy festival, and they have all of these. This is in the '90s, so you have all of these modern comics, stand-up comics come in. And Bart is frustrated because Krusty the Clown is not part of it. Well, Krusty the Clown is a very 1950s comedian.
Oh, yeah.
And he comes up and he hasn't been on stage doing stand-up since the 1950s. And he starts doing TV dinner jokes.
Mm.
And he says, well, I better pull out my A material. And he does a miso sali bit.
Oh.
Yeah. And it just it just ruins his career, and he has to get back on. But there was a question of people being out of touch like that, and being so racially out of touch, and not really paying attention to what's happening in the world and what's happening in the culture. But was it wrong of the writers of that episode to address it in that way? I don't know. It's kind of an up in the air thing,
Yeah.
because you're like, how can you address a man who's out of touch racially without portraying it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a dig at Asian people. It's a dig at people who are completely in the dark.
Right. It's a dig at clueless Americans.
Right.
Um,
Or
a
somebody who's
lot
just
of the
not paying
Sim-
attention to the culture.
a lot of the Simpsons are digs at American culture.
Yeah.
The Simpsons in and of itself is a dig at America.
I'm a lifelong fan of The Simpsons, and it's always been, because they've always been very careful to. They don't do what Family Guy does. Family Guy will just go after a racial joke, just, as a punch in the face. But
I like both approaches, because Family Guy takes the racist jokes and throws them in your face and basically says, "This is what people used to laugh at."
yeah,
And you laugh not at the joke, but at the fact that they had the audacity to confront the joke.
yeah,
Whereas on The Simpsons, it's all. Seth MacFarlane doesn't do subtlety,
no,
whereas The Simpsons writers have always been very good at subtlety.
and character building
Right.
and building a continuity.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that in Family Guy they reference the fact that it's a show, and that none of what there was one episode where Peter's like, "What's the difference? What happens? It's all going to reset, and we're not going to remember this next week anyway."
Yeah, they get to the end, and they're sitting on the couch, and they have the sitcom. They have the sitcom wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes there's just not a sitcom wrap up.
Right. There. One of the more recent Family Guys, something just happens, and Stewie looks at the camera and says, "Yeah, we don't really know how to end these anymore."
Yeah.
And then it just cuts to black.
Yeah.
Didn't even finish the story. It was just over.
But that was an issue that I was thinking about, and I don't mean to connect that with Satyjit Ray just because the character is Indian, but it was something that just kind of happened to be in the orbit while I was watching this movie. And if you're like me and you've been with The Simpsons since December of 1989, constantly and persistently, and you've seen the character grow, and you've seen what they've done, but you've also seen what they haven't done,
Mm-hmm.
because you built a character who has a degree a master's degree in neuroscience. You have a
Mm-hmm.
degree in, all of this. But his business is he owns a quickie mart.
Right.
And they've allowed him to get married. He has children
Mm-hmm.
throughout the run. They've allowed him to. He's an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
He has a philosophy about certain things. He's a vegan. Um, and they just build all of these little characters, but they still keep him in this little box,
Right.
and that's frustrating.
Right. They try to fill up the box instead of
Kicking down the box.
instead of expanding it out and getting rid of it. Yeah,
Right.
it's they're packing it full, and there's too much in it,
And
and it's gonna fall apart.
the characters, there's an episode, the two Mrs. Nahasapima Pedalons, where he gets married. And it's Apu, his bride Manjula, and his mother.
Hmm.
All three played by Americans. All of them.
Wow.
It's Hank Azaria, Jan Hooks, and Andrea Martin. And it's like all of them are Americans.
Wow.
Yeah. But this was in the 90s. This was in the late 90s. Not that that makes it okay, but it's just it's a very frustrating thing.
Yeah, but maybe at some point you and I can take some time and do like a month of getting to know movies and from areas that we're unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
That could be
We're
fun.
watching a movie we haven't seen, like Philosopher's Stone.
Right. um, I think that about wraps it up
Okay.
here for us. What do we have coming up?
Next week's gonna be a lot of fun. We are going to make an attempt to talk about the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and not have it be depressing. We're going to talk about not really the event itself, but the media culture that came up around it.
Mhm.
How television handled it, fictionalized television handled it, how the movies have handled it, what it has meant to the culture at large in the last 2 decades.
And what the impact now still is.
Right.
So yeah, that's gonna be an interesting show. Um, you can find all of our back episodes at thepodbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. Uh, you can listen to us on iTunes and YouTube, and hit the like, subscribe, and the notifications there. At pod_bay is our handle, conveniently at Twitter and at Patreon, where we'll have an exclusive on Citizen Kane coming up very, very shortly, if it's not already up by the time this airs. And we thank you very much for joining us, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
No,